Hello everyone, Redneck Reloader here. Thanks for joining me today. I hope this sounds okay. I'm in a little apartment. I've got my air conditioner running, so I've got my lapel mic on. Hopefully sound canceling will work well. I'm doing a little reloading today. I'm in between residences, so I have this little setup here in my little apartment. And I was just going to go over it quickly. I'm going to do some 45 ACP with some semi-wet wad cutters. This is a new bullet for me. First time I've loaded them. I made 10 test ones and they ran okay through my gun because my gun's kind of particular. So I'm going to go load another 50. I went to the range and shot 50 up the other day, so I got my brass back. And I'm going to go ahead and load these up. So I've got my setup here, and I just kind of go over it briefly, just kind of show you, call it whatever you want. A minimalistic setup, I just call it my apartment setup. A lot of it's the same stuff that I used to have in my reloading room. I've just added a few other little components and taken away some. So just for basics, I've just got a fold-out plastic table here that I got from Walmart that I use for several things here in the apartment. And I've got my dies. Now these are Lee dies. I know they're in RCBS box, but I bought them used and I have an old box and I put them in there so I can have one for them. I also have a factory crimp die. That's not necessary, I just happen to have it. It's something I bought years ago for this gun just because it's very particular load for. I found out it really didn't make a difference if I used it or not, but since I already have it, I'm going to use it. I've got my Lee hand press and the priming tool that comes with it. I've got my 50 cases. I have a dummy round made up, so I don't have my calipers out because I don't need them. I've already made up a dummy round, so that's what I'm going to set my length to. I have some large pistol primers, and I have my scale, which I don't have set up just yet, but I will set it up when I get to that point. Funnel, I've got a loading block to hold my rounds, I've got my bullets, and I've got some powder, and today I'm using tight group. And just a few other little things. I've got my barrel because I always do a plump test on this particular gun. I don't do it with every round I load because most of my guns, I load the same stuff, I know my guns, I know what they'll run, so I don't need to do it. But this particular gun is so weird about stuff, and I really have to load specifically for it, so I always do plump tests with it. I got a little plastic cut-off cup that I put powder in when I'm scooping it out from my scale, and I usually use lead dippers. I can't find my lead dippers, they must not have made my trip with me. So I've been using just a plastic spoon to dip my powder, which works, but I find that I spill a lot just because it's flat and shallow. And so I just got a little measuring spoon, half teaspoon, out of my kitchen. And I'm going to try this today. This is a little bit more like the lead dippers. I think it might work better. It's a trial thing. So this is my setup. So I'm going to start out with just priming these cases. Or not priming, I'm sorry. Resizing the cases, de-priming the cases. So I've got my Lee hand press set up. I've already got my shell holder in it. And I'm going to put in my first die. This is the decapping die, and I'm just going to screw this down. I'm going to close up the press, and I'm just going to screw it down until it touches the shell holder. This is a carbide die, so I don't want to put any over cam on it because you can break the carbide insert, but you want it to be touching the shell holder so that you're sizing the whole length of the case. So I'm just going to screw it down just till it touches, and I'm going to close up the lock ring. So that should be set, and I'm just going to start going through my cases one at a time. I haven't tumbled these or cleaned these or anything. I literally just shot these and picked them back up. They're all clean. They're not shiny and polished. I don't do that. I just basically pick them up, wipe them off with a rag, and then I hold them. So. Now when these are deprimed, the ram is hollow, so the primer is caught. What I usually do when I'm doing stuff like this is I set up all my brass in the loading block, and then after I deprime it, I just flip them upside down and put them back in the block. And that way I'm not chasing them around, but I know which ones I've done already, and it's easy to keep up with them that way. So I'm just going to go through and do all these. This is not a fast setup by any means. It's certainly not the most efficient, especially weighing out the powder. To do 50 rounds here, it's probably going to take me close to an hour to weigh them out, because it probably takes me about a minute for each one to weigh out the powder. But I'm not setting it up for a fast system. I could speed it up, I could use a powder thrower, I could get some dippers and use those, although I don't usually use those with tight grip because it's such a small charge going in there that just a little bit of difference makes a big difference. Something like Unique or HS6, I tend to use dippers more. But with tight grip, I weigh every single charge because it's so tight. But it's very cost efficient. Goes a very long way, and it's gotten me a lot through all this nonsense of the last couple of years with the shortages and everything else. I managed to get a few pounds of tight group. I've got some other powders, but I got a few pounds of tight group, and I'm still working through it. I haven't had to tap into any of my other powders yet. And so it does go a long way, and it's inexpensive. So I'm growing to like it more and more. So I'm going to go ahead and cut here because you don't need to watch me resize and deprime all 50 of these, and then I'll come back when I get to the next step, and I'll show you what I'm doing there. Okay, while I'm doing this, I'm also going to throw in some observations about the Lee hand press, because this is new to me. I've only been using it a short time. And this is the most I've loaded in one session. Actually, that's wrong. I did load, I loaded 59 millimeter the other day with it. But I don't usually sit down and do this many. So the operation of the press, you got to find what works best for you. You got to kind of hold it upright because I've noticed if you let it flop, I guess it depends on your shell holder. Mine are kind of loose, so if you try to like do it on the side or something, the bed to fall out. Even holding it upright, I've noticed when you're like, you push it up into the die, when you're pulling it out of the die, it's kind of stiff, and you have to kind of jerk it a little bit sometimes, and the case will fall out. It kind of jerks its way out. Out of loading these 50, actually I did 53, I had a couple extra cases on the side I just deprimed. Out of those I dropped a couple and had to pick them up out of the floor after I had resized them. So that's something I noticed. It's a minor irritant. I actually really like this press. Without this press, I really wouldn't be able to do this right now because I don't have a place to set up a permanent press. But it does get a little tiring. This is definitely not a setup if you're like shooting competitively and you're loading thousands of rounds a week. In my case, I'm in an area right now I really can't shoot. It's a very liberal part of the country. Gun laws are bad, and I can't just go out and shoot anywhere. I don't have any property of my own to go shoot at, and I really don't know anybody up here where I can go shoot on their property. So I'm kind of limited to going to an indoor gun range local. And there is an outdoor range, but I haven't been to it yet. But you can't bring outside ammunition, you have to use their ammo. So I am forced to go in and buy guns. So I went in and bought some Cellar and Pellet 45 a day, and I happened to go first thing in the morning. I was the first one there, and so it was all clean, and the guy's pretty cool, and he kind of lets me do what I want to do. So he lets me always pick up my brass. So I was able to pick up all my brass and actually a few extra little pieces because they hadn't cleaned up that well the night before. So I found a little extra brass laying around, and I get to save my box. So next I have a garbage can full of empty boxes. So it's kind of cool. You can grab boxes out of there if you want to, but I just use to save my own. So in this case, what I'm doing is I went out and shot 50 rounds. Now I'm just reloading this 50. And putting it back in the box just to save it. So for this, it's perfect. But for larger scale stuff, I definitely would want a mounted press. The other thing I wanted to discuss is the primer containment system, where you deprime and the primer goes down inside the ramp. It works excellent. I didn't drop a single primer. This caught every 53 I did here. It caught every one. I haven't had a primer fall out yet if I'm using this. So for that, it's nice. What I have found is what you've got to do afterwards is take the shell holder out and then go take it upside down over the garbage can or something. And I usually just kind of work it like this to kind of bounce them out. Using 50 large primers, I found that they actually got jammed in there and didn't want to come out. I guess they were kind of packing in on top of each other. So I had to take a little, actually took a little thin bladed pocket knife I had and stick it down in there and kind of break them up a little bit and shake them out. So in the future when I use this, I think after every 10 or 15 that I deprime, I'm probably going to go ahead and dump the primers because I was sticking all 50 in there. It held all 50, but actually filled it right to the top. 50 large primers is like the maximum that it would hold. And they got jammed in there and they were kind of a pain to get out. So if you're going to get one of these, that's just something maybe to keep in mind. So I'm going to move on to the next step now. These have all been deprimed and resized. So now I'm going to flare the case now to hold the bullets. So for this particular die for Lee, the setup for this die, you're supposed to screw it down until it touches the shell holder, and then back it out one full turn, and then screw it in gradually to get the amount of bell that you want on the case mount. In my case, I bell these quite a bit when I'm using high-tech coated bullets because I find that they do tend to shave a little bit. So I only turn back about a quarter of a turn because I know that's about what I want. I want quite a bit of belling. So I'm just going to turn this back and lock down the lock ring. I'm going to run one and just kind of test it. I've got a bullet here, so I'm going to run it up in there. I'm going to see if I'm happy with that. And I am. That looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them now. You notice my cases, I've got them upside down. I told you, like, after I resize and deprime them, I always put them open mouth down so I can see that they've been deprimed and I know what I've done. Now as I do this, I'm going to flip them back the other way. And that way it's easy for me to keep them in the case and I know that they're all good. Now, usually at this time with a mounted press, when I do this, I'm also repriming the cases. But with this particular press, that's not possible because the little priming tool that comes on there takes the place of a die. I guess you could get a hand primer and do them by hand. If I were going to do this long term, I probably would, but I typically like to prime on the press. My RCBS press that I've got in storage, it's good for priming. It works good for me. So since I'm just doing this temporary, I'm just using the little priming tool that comes with this press, and it just adds an extra little step. But as I said, this is a temporary setup, and I'm not doing a large amount of loading. I'm going to sit here for an hour, hour and a half and do these. That's fine with me. It's kind of a hobby. I'm not doing anything else today. I've got to go to work later, so I'm just kind of sitting around the house all the time. If I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be sitting there watching TV. So I could be watching TV while I was doing this, but since I'm making the video, I have it turned off. So for me, it's just kind of good therapy to go through and do this, but I understand it's not for everybody. And I want to speed through the process a little bit more, so maybe one of the hand primers would be good for you. So I'm just going to go through and bell all these, and then I'll come back and prime them, and I'll show you that step. So now I have all the case mounts belled, so now I'm going to remove my die, and with this press there's a quick change bushing, and I'm going to remove it. You just turn it a quarter of a turn and pull it straight out. And I'm going to replace it with this. This is their priming tool. And you just put it in, turn it a quarter of a turn, and your shell holder gets moved from the ram up to this device. And that's where you put your case. And then you put the plunger down here. It comes with two plungers, large and small primer. Now I'm doing 45 ACP, and these are all large primers. So it sits in like that, you place your primer, you place your case, and you work the press, and that seats the primer. So that's the step I'm moving on to now. So I've got some pistol primers here, large pistol primers. I usually just dump out 10 at a time when I'm working with them like this, so they don't go flying all over the place, since, I don't know, these are worth like $1 a piece now or whatever it is. So you take my first case and place it. I'm going to take my first primer, place it on the plunger, and then you run the ram up and give it a little push, and there's our primer. Do that 49 more times and I'll have everything primed. So it's simple as that. So as I said, this is actually a really smooth working system. It does well. It's not the fastest way by any means, but it works good and it suits my needs. So I'm going to go through and prime all of these. The next step will be to place powder, place our bullets, crimp, and we're done. So I'll go ahead and come back after I get all these primed, and I'll show you how we're going to do the next step. But this is how their priming system works. It's pretty good. Okay, so now I'm set up. I've set my press aside for time being. I've got my scale set up. Turn my air conditioner off because the breeze blowing through will adjust the scale. And I've got some powder out, some tight group. I put it in this little cup. It's easier to get to. I've got my little measuring spoon I'm going to use. And I've got my cases set up and I've got my funnel out. And what I'm going to do is weigh out each charge, dump it in the case, move to the next one. This is probably going to take me an hour to do all these, but as I said, I'm not in a big hurry. I've got my scale set for 5 grains. I've got my load data from the Hodgdon website. They've gotten much better about putting load data up for cast bullets. So they actually have data for this particular 200 grain lead semi-wide cutter. Their range, going from memory without looking at my book, it's 4.8 grains to 5.4 grains. And I'm loading at 5.0 grains. So that's what I've got my scale set for. So I'm just going to do 1 or 2 of these just to kind of show you the process. But I just start out dumping a little powder in until I get to the right charge. And I kind of go slow with this because it's really a pain if you put too much in and try to get some out. It's easier to just go under. Trickler would be nice for this. I just don't have one. But if you have one, by all means use it. As I said, I just dip a little bit at a time. This, so far, I'm liking this little measuring spoon better than using just a plastic spoon. That I am a big fan of the lead dippers. Just can't find mine. Might have to buy some more. So let the scale settle. Still a little low. There we go. 5.0. So I'm going to go ahead and dump this one and move on to the next case. So I'll be doing this for a while. I'll get all 50 of these charged. I'll save you the agony of watching me do this. But this is by all means the slowest portion of all this. But it's necessary. As I said, you can use some powder throwers and things to speed it up. And definitely I went a little bit over on that one, so I'm going to dump just a little out. With tight group especially, I am really cautious because it is such a tight range. And the other thing with tight group is you're using so little powder in the case, it would be very easy to do a double charge. So I'm just extra cautious with it. I'm cautious anyway when I'm loading, and always double, triple checking my powder charges and stuff. But with tight group especially, I kind of am super aware of that because of its properties. But it's good powder though, and like I said, it's inexpensive and it goes a very long way. So it's a good product. And I had never used it before all the COVID stuff started and the shortages and stuff. It just wasn't one of the pistol powders I'd used. But when all that started and everything disappeared off the shelf, it was all I could find, you know, at the beginning when the shortages first started. So I bought a few pounds of it. I did find some others. I got some Green Dot, got a couple pounds of it, and I just kind of put that back. That's if I run out of tight group, I'll switch and start using that. But I still have some tight group left. But that's about it for that. So I'll be back. Okay, folks. we're back. It's been about an hour. I've got all 50 cases charged. I went ahead and put on my scale and stuff to get it out of the way. So the next step is seat the bullets and crimp. So when I get them like this, what I like to do with this setup especially is I just go ahead and stick a bullet down in each case because it's too easy to spill. Knock the case around and spill it. So I'm just kind of putting a cork in them, and I just find that works better for me. I don't always do this when I'm working on a bench. I usually just do them one at a time, but like I said, with this setup, this table's shaky, and kind of banging things around with this hand press and stuff. So I will just feel better if I just go ahead and do this, and that way if I knock over a case, I won't spill it. So just go through and stick the bullets in each one. And as I said, these cases are ready to go now. They've been resized, belled, primed, and charged. And so now it's just a matter of seating the bullet, and then I'm going to load my seating die in. Now the way this particular die gets set up is you screw it down until it touches the shell holder. There. Then you back it out 3 full turns, and the reason you're doing that is that makes it so it does not crimp at all. And then you can screw the body in to adjust your crimp. In my case, I'm not going to be using that. I'm going to use the factory crimp die, so I'm just going to screw it out 3 turns and lock it down. There. Now, the plunger is what you screw in and out to adjust the seating depth. And the way I'm going to seat that is I have a dummy round that I've made up. So I'm just going to put in my dummy round, run it up in there, and I'm going to screw the plunger down until it comes in contact with the end of the bullet. Feels pretty good there. Now I'm going to run a bullet up in there and check it. I'm just eyeballing it right here. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and seat the rest of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these, and then I'll be coming back and I'll be crimping them. Okay, now for the final step, these just all have to be crimped. So I'm going to use the Lee factory crimp die, and I'll show you how to set it up. You screw it, excuse me, hiccups. You screw it in until it just touches the shell holder, and then you lock the lock ring down. And the plunger, you back it out. I usually back it out quite a ways. Now you take a loaded and primed case where the bullet's already been seated, and you put it up inside there. Now it does go through a sizing ring as it goes in and out, and Lee does say in their directions that if you put a extreme amount of belling on the case mount, the case may not fit through the sizing ring. If that happens, what they say is to go ahead and use your regular crimp to bring the bell down, then you can run it through the factory crimp die after that. I've never had that problem, and I put quite a bit of belling on all of mine, so I don't think you'll have that problem, but if you do, that's how you deal with that. So I screw the plunger in all the way until I just feel it touch the case, and then I'm going to open it, and what they say to do is to turn it a half turn for a light crimp or a full turn for a heavy crimp. So I'm going to just start out trying it with the half and see how that does for me. So run it back in there, and it does have a crimp. So let's see how it does a plunk test. That works for me. It you can hear it plunk in. It spins freely, and I can actually wiggle it back and forth a little bit, which is what I like to do with this gun in particular. So that's good. So that's one done. 49 more to go. I'm going to, I won't do every single round, but at least for a few, just to make sure the setting hasn't changed or anything. I will occasionally still do a plunk test on these just to make sure they're good, because I don't want to put a bunch together that won't run in my gun. And these are good, so I'm just going to go ahead and crimp the rest of these, fill up my box, and I'll have a new box of ammo. It's kind of slow and time consuming with this setup, but it does allow me to reload in my apartment, and it's not an expensive setup, and there's things you can do to speed it up. By far the slowest part of this process is the powder charging. So obviously a powder thrower or one of the automatic powder, I don't know what they're called, but like the scales that automatically spits the powder out and brings it up to level. One of those, something like that would certainly speed it up quite a bit. But for me and my needs at the moment, this is sufficient. I am shopping around for a new house. Want to buy a new house. I'm going to have a nice reloading room set up, and I'll be back to my old standards. Also going to have a nice piece of property with some on-site shooting, so I'll be able to do a lot more shooting videos and stuff. So that's where we're at. I'm done with this. I'll wrap it up. But thanks for watching, and if you're thinking about getting one of these Lee hand presses, hopefully maybe this kind of gives you a little bit better idea of what you're in store for and if it'll fit your needs or not. So for now, I'm going to close. Thank you for watching. This is Redneck Reloader, and I will see you next time. God bless.